Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cabinet of Curiosities on our own devices. I'm Jean Messier, and longtime viewers of the channel might have noticed that for someone who doesn't count photography among his many hobbies, I sure have covered a lot of photographic equipment on this channel. From the tiny Japanese hit camera, to the large Midge magazine camera, to camera accessories like flashes, to an entire book on the interpretation of aerial reconnaissance photographs. And while I'm not really a photographer myself, I think what fascinates me about photographic technology is that it's been around for over a century and a half. And during that period, it has continuously evolved, not only to make photographs more lifelike, clear, and more colorful, but also to make the photographic process more accessible and user-friendly for the average consumer. And this has inevitably resulted in a whole range of weird and wonderful and often ingenious solutions to particular problems, which is, after all, what this entire channel is about. Now, today we're going to be diving back into the world of photography, but we're not going to be looking at a camera. Rather, we're going to be looking at the other end of the photographic process. This is a Kodak No.2 developing outfit, and if you were in amateur photography in the early part of the 20th century, this is what you would have bought in order to set up your own darkroom. And in a previous episode, I talked about my love for kits, particularly complete kits from the past that have survived intact, and this is almost complete. And when I found this in a local flea market, I knew that I had to do a video on this one. This is just really, really neat. But before we actually open this up and have a look at what's inside, let's review how the chemistry of black and white photography actually works. So black and white photographic emulsion is composed of fine particles of silver halide suspended in some sort of binder, traditionally gelatin-based, and applied either to a glass plate in older photographic equipment, or later, flexible celluloid or acetate film. And when this emulsion is struck by light, when an image from a camera's lens is projected onto it, those crystals that are struck by light will decompose into a crystal of metallic silver and a bromine ion. And this pattern of exposed silver halide crystals that have decomposed is known as a latent image. And it's so called because it's not really visible to the human eye. It's not very dense, and the reflectivity and the transparency of exposed silver halide crystals versus unexposed is almost nil, meaning the entire film will look black. So in order to turn this into an image that can be seen by the human eye, the film needs to undergo a process known as development. Now, the first step in the developing process is to amplify that latent image, to grow those crystals out until they are dense enough to actually form a visible image. And there are a number of chemicals that can do this. Some of the traditional developers used in black and white photography are metol, or monomethyl p-aminophenol hemisulfate, phenidone, or 1-phenyl-3-pyrazolidinone, dimazone, or 4,4-dimethyl-1-phenylpyrazolidine-threone, and hydroquinone, benzene 1,4-diol. And these solutions typically need to be alkaline in order to work, so they're typically mixed with an alkalizing agent such as sodium carbonate, borax, or sodium hydroxide. And what these do is they promote the growth of the exposed silver halide crystals over the unexposed, and it causes that latent image to become denser and denser with crystals until it can actually be seen. But this process can't go on forever. Although the developer does promote the growth of the exposed crystals over the unexposed, it still promotes the growth of the unexposed crystals, which means if you leave the film in the developer bath for too long, then the whole thing will just turn black. All different types of crystals will grow to cover the entire film. So once the latent image has been amplified enough, you then need to stop that process. And this is accomplished using what's known as a stop bath. And as I said before, Developers tend to be alkaline, so the best way of stopping the reaction is to use an acid to neutralize it, which is why the most common stop bath chemical is a weak acid, such as acetic acid or white vinegar. So now you have an amplified latent image, but you still have all that unexposed silver halide on the film. So the next step of the development process is known as fixing. And this involves the use of a chemical to dissolve away the unexposed silver halide, leaving the metallic silver from the exposed regions of the film behind. And the most common fixer used in black and white photography is sodium thiosulfate, which is known in the industry as hypo. So now that you've removed all of the unexposed silver halide and you're left with an image, you dry out the film, and congratulations, you now have a developed negative. But you're not quite done yet because, as the name implies, this is a negative image. The places in the real world image that were the brightest are the darkest on the film. And so there's one more step, which is printing, where you take the negative, put it on top of a piece of photosensitive paper, project a light onto it, and this will reverse the image and give you a final product that looks a lot more like real life with the light and dark areas in the correct place. And this can either be done one-to-one, where you simply put the film against the photo paper and you produce a positive image of the same size, or you can make an enlargement by using a lens to magnify the image when it gets projected onto the photo paper. And finally, you have your developed photograph. All right, so now that we've had a look at the chemistry of development and how that actually works, let's actually open up the box and see what we can find inside. Fortunately, the box is not in the best condition. We can see that the kit is fairly complete. This is a candle-powered safety lamp. We'll come back to that in a second. This is photosensitive paper for making prints. This we'll also come back to because this dates the entire kit. We have our instruction manual. We have a mask that goes with the photosensitive paper for making prints. This is a measuring cup, a tin of developer, and we have a whole bunch of small vials also full of developer. This is a candle for the lamp. This is a frame for making prints. We'll take a closer look at how that works. This is a stirring rod, a thermometer. These are the trays for the various chemicals, and then 2 metal clips. And here is the entire kit, a little bit better laid out. So how you would use this kit is that you would lay out these 3 trays, and you would fill one with your developer, one with your stop bath, and one with your fixer. Now you would mix up the developer yourself using the powder in this tin or in these vials, along with this measuring cup and the glass stir rod. And you would use the thermometer to ensure that the developer was at the correct temperature for optimum effect. The stop bath, as I mentioned before, would have just been dilute acetic acid, white vinegar, whereas the fixer is not part of this kit. It apparently hasn't survived. So, according to the instructions, these clips are for holding the film out of the camera. So you would clip one to either end, and you would use this to run the film through each of your different baths. And then you would use a nail on the wall to hang these through the hole and allow the film to dry. And this would allow you to produce your negatives. Now, if you wanted to make prints, you would use this printing frame. And how you'd use this is you would undo these latches at the back. You can see that they're spring-loaded to apply tension and hold everything firmly together. You would then put your negatives against the glass. If you were doing one-to-one prints, you would presumably put a whole bunch of different negatives to fill the space. And then you would take your photosensitive paper and put it on top, then close it and tension it down, and then you would expose the frame to light in order to transfer the image onto the paper. So there's one aspect of black and white photography that we haven't touched on yet, which is the fact that in your darkroom, you need to be able to see what you're doing, but if you turn on a light, it's going to ruin your film. It's going to expose it. So what do you do? Well, the traditional solution is to use a safety light, which is just a light with a red filter, a wavelength of red that the photographic film isn't particularly sensitive to. So by illuminating your darkroom this way, you're able to see what you're doing and it won't expose the film. Now, ideally for this, you would use a light bulb, but you have to remember that in the early part of the 20th century, not everywhere was electrified all at once. And especially, say, in rural Canada and the United States, there were quite a few places that didn't receive electricity until the Second World War or even afterward. And Kodak would have been aware of this, which is why in this kit, they give you a non-electrically powered alternative, which is this lamp that I was talking about. And let's actually go in closer and see how this goes together. Okay, so let's pull this out. You've got the top, we've got the screen, we've got a base with a candle. The screen is hinged, it's translucent. That fits onto the base like that. And then the chimney fits on like that. And voila, you have a little candle-powered safety lamp for your darkroom. And finally, there's one last piece of this kit worth looking at, and it's a rather amusing one. Now, I told you at the beginning of the video that this kit was made in the 1940s. Well, that's actually not printed anywhere on the box or in the instruction manual or anything, but this little slip of paper that came packed with the kit makes it very clear when this was manufactured. And so it reads, in some instances, specific Kodak products mentioned in How to Make Good Pictures are no longer available. It would be surprising were this not so, for Kodak, like so many other American manufacturers, is busy with the special production of urgently needed war material. Basic photographic requirements can generally be met. Your own resourcefulness may, however, become increasingly important to your enjoyment of and progress in photography. Your dealer is ready and able to help. So too, to the best of its ability, is the Eastman Kodak Company. So basically, a very polite way of saying, if we don't have something in stock, shut up, don't you know there's a war on, which very clearly dates this kit to the 1940s during the Second World War. And I just found that very amusing. It's a very fascinating inclusion in here that really puts the whole kit in historical context. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Like I said, it's just so much fun to be able to find and examine kits like this that have survived through the decades, more or less intact, and in this case, be able to see what would have been commercially available to an amateur photographer in the first half of the 20th century. Anyway, I'll see you next time on another episode of Cabinet of Curiosities, where we'll look at yet more fascinating kits and other devices like this. But until then, thank you for watching. I'm Jean Messier from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.